Hello and welcome everyone to the live webinar on climate change organized by AXA as part of its 10th CR Week 2020. Thank you very much for joining us from everywhere in the world. Climate change, why companies must react fast. This is the question we'd like to explore during this webinar. So I'm Annette Burgdorf and I'm very happy to be joined by Véronique Andrieux, Chief Executive Officer, WWF France. She will tell us why business as usual is no longer an option. So I will first interview my guest and then I will take your question. You can send through from now on and we will aim to answer as many as possible at the end of this interview. Also, if you need to drop off for any reasons, we will be circulating a recording of the entire webinar in the coming days for you to rejoin. So now let me welcome Véronique Andrieux, Chief Executive Officer, WWF France. Hello, Véronique.
Hello.
Thank you very much for coming. So I would like to present you in a few words. You're an international development specialist. You worked with different NGOs such as Oxfam as a regional director and with Action contre la faim as executive director. You were also senior policy advisor at the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a senior advisor at the Club de Madrid, which is a very important forum of former democratic presidents and prime ministers who support democracy. And since August 2019, you're CEO of France of the Worldwide Fund for Nature, which is one of the main international environmental organizations, or the main, I think, whose mission is to stop the degradation of the planet's natural environment and to build a future in which humans live in harmony with nature. So I just would like to mention as well that you have a partnership with the AXA Group. And by the way, you are a beneficiary of the activities organized by the entity AXA Partners during this CR week. So let's go straight to the point. Worst wildfires in 18 years have raged across California since August. Komodo dragon, which is one of the largest species of lizard, could be driven by extinction to extinction by global warming and rising sea level. Melting Antarctic ice will raise level by 2.5 meters. Even if Paris climate goals are met, studies find, and the world is preparing for a second wave of COVID-19. I think the list can be much longer. I think that our planet is burning and we do business as usual.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much to AXA for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Yes, I mean, the planet is burning, as you rightly said. Fires, I mean, we've seen this year and last year mega fires as never before. These fires are driven by deforestation, linked to our food system and the intensive agricultural model, but also to climate change. So Australia, for instance, 3 billion animals are dead, worst catastrophe. California fires now. I mean, it's really impacting heavily. It's not about future generations. It's about present. It's about today. And so there's a level of suffering that is really, I mean, we're paying a toll, a very high toll. So I would like to say, first of all, science is unanimous about climate change, about global warming. So we must reduce and cut greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We must become to become carbon neutral and get to net zero. So this is a must. And so the problem is that Paris Accord is not necessarily being is not met today. For instance, our current trends would put us on a trajectory of between 4 and 5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, while Paris Accord, as you said, is about well below 2 degrees and, if possible, 1.5 degrees scenario. So we're really, nowhere near those targets, and so there is 1 decade ahead, and it's very important because now next year we're going to see the COP26 and the COP15 on biodiversity and COP26 on climate change, and it's really very important that we raise the level of ambition to meet Paris Agreement goals.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit more about the current trends? Yeah, what are the consequences, concrete consequences on the climate of human activity?
Indeed, I mean, when we say climate, it means, climate change, it means temperatures rising, it means sea level rising, of course. It means as well that our food security is at stake because the crops are less. It means unsustainable fishing practices, that means less fish. It's also about water scarcity. It's about health, because as we're experiencing today, COVID-19 and previous zoonoses are also a product of nature destruction. So this nature degradation is completely linked to pandemics, and so it's about health. That's why we say that nature is our life insurance, and it's very important that we protect it, not for the sake only of ecosystems and species, but for one of those species, which is humankind. And so it's very important to really understand that we are part of nature, and that saving nature is saving us. I would say that, for instance, coming back to science, IPBES, which is the equivalent for biodiversity of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, they stated very clearly that 80% of the Sustainable Development Goals are at stake if we continue destroying nature. So it's really important that we understand that we must do this for our own health, our rights, and the SDGs.
But do you think that I exaggerate if I say the situation is really dramatic? And how is it possible to remain optimistic? Do you think we have solutions? What are the solutions?
Well, WWF just released its Living Planet report with really bleak figures and numbers. The data are not good. It's a scientific analysis about the population size of mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians, and it's a 78% decline of the living world. This is really alarming, a very alarming sign. But there is reason for optimism, because the solutions exist, and science is very clear that we are still on time. It is our choice to really halt and reverse this trend. So it is doable. It is up to us to really to do it. And the solutions are there, they're known, and there is a consensus around those solutions. For instance, we must stop deforestation. We must change and transform the food production model and transition to a sustainable food production. We must go towards a circular economy. We must cut harmful subsidies for nature and climate. And of course, we must align our trajectories to the Paris Accord.
And you recently published a report about biodiversity. Could you just tell us a bit about the key learnings of this report?
Yes, so it's the Living Planet report by WWF. So it measures the population sizes of mammals, fish, reptiles, and birds back from 1970 until 2016. And so there's 68% of nature loss. So that's one key finding. Of course, it covers a range of regions and ecosystems. Some regions are most affected, such as Latin America and Caribbean. Some natural habitats are more affected, such as, for instance, wetlands, rivers, lakes. So these are really at risk. And there's also solutions that are proposed. So, for instance, transition our food system is one. How we produce and how we and our way of consumption, our ways of consumption, food consumption. And of course, conservation, that must go further. We need to really invest and enhance conservation based on local communities.
And you mentioned that there are solutions and that politics are getting engaged, but I would like to focus on the role of companies. What do you think is their role to contribute to in this fight against climate change?
So we must understand that this is a whole of society issue. It won't be sorted out by one state or one actor. It's whole of society. All of us must play a role, including, of course, industries and private companies, but public companies, all of us. And of course, heads of state, citizens, cities. So
do you think this is the way to not work anymore in silos? So that it means everybody has to work together. This is key to success.
Oh yes, I think it's at the roots of let's say a social contract, a glue that binds us together, because that's the common goal, the common purpose that humanity must have, and it really underpins the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. So that's really the way to go, in my opinion. And so companies have, of course, they are responsible for part of the problem that we're tackling, but they're also part of the solution. And companies can, of course, act on their core business to transform it really profoundly, go to, for instance, to a circular economy, cut emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, zero deforestation. Those are really concrete transformations of their core business and decisions that the top management must and can take. And then they can also, of course, act across the value chain, touching on their suppliers, but also their employees and consumers. That's very important, because the role of their influence and their outreach can be very important. So in particular, champions and leaders per industry, I think there is an expectation from society that they step up and play a leading role to really improve and take the industry further.
And when we focus on AXA, so AXA has launched recently a 3-year partnership with you, WWF France, to accelerate the integration of biodiversity in to its activities. How do you see this partnership?
Well, it's very important for us. We at WWF work across a wide array of sectors, like, I don't know, food sector, beverages, automotive, construction, and others. But finance is very important. So for us, finance matters very much, because it can shift the trillions in a virtuous way. That's why we have this partnership with AXA. We started, for instance, last year, a very interesting research and then a report that we presented during the G7 together, and I think that was powerful. And we did some recommendations around how to assess, analyze, and understand better nature-related risks. How those risks matter for the decisions that banks, insurers, and investors take every day. So it means that rather than having only a climate lenses, we complement climate lenses with nature lenses, because sometimes nature risks are forgotten, or because they will come later, they're more difficult to understand. And today we see that the material risk coming from nature is very important.
And so could you mention any projects you work on with AXA, concretely, any concrete figures?
Yes, indeed. Well, so last year there was this Into the Wild report that was launched at the G7 and was greatly influential. And so we made this one big recommendation that was to set what we call a TNFD. That means a task force on nature-related financial disclosure. this is the equivalent for nature of the TCFD that already exists. And so this is very important because, as I was saying before, there is an international series of very important events coming up. The COP26, COP15, those are UN conventions that will set the objectives by 2030. Objectives on biodiversity and objectives on climate. So it's very important that the TNFD is launched, and the idea is to launch it either at the IUCN World Congress in January or later this year, or at the COP15 on the biodiversity convention. So this is one example. Another example is that AXA has joined an initiative that was also funded by WWF, which is the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance. That was 1 year ago. And so that's very important because that's financial institutions that commit to transition their portfolios and to align them with 1.5 scenario of the Paris Agreement. So this is really good because this means to cut down greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. So this is really important commitments, and so we are accompanying AXA to really raise the level of ambition, to jointly find ways to translate those commitments into practice.
Okay, and do you think that AXA can play a role can be a role model in this insurance and investment sector?
Well, hopefully so. We are, I mean, the idea is, as I said, that per industry, per sector, that there are like champions really, you know, taking the lead and showing, demonstrating on practice in the real world that it is doable, and showing how to go about it. So, but it's a recent partnership. So it's you know, now it's we have the commitments, we have all, and it's time to deliver and to translate those commitments into action. So now it's very important that that AXA top management and the teams are really motivated and completely devoted to the implementation and an actual delivery of those commitments.
That brings me to another question. You mentioned the teams. What is the importance of the teams of people at AXA or everywhere in other companies?
Well, it's a treasury. I mean, it's so important because it's this human intelligence, this collective intelligence, to first grasp of course the gravity of the situation, but as well the solutions, and to really be a force for innovation, proposition internally, and to really spearhead change internally. So those internal champions and this approach is also in terms of how to work together, ways of working collectively, I think can bring about change. And it's very important that, of course, the top management leads the way, but that it trickles down to the whole of the team, and that it becomes something that is embedded and ingrained in the team's, let's say, DNA. And also it gives them pride, I think, and sense of purpose, of why they get up every morning, why they come to work, and to work for a company that is doing the right thing and is working not only for profit, but that is really working for society and for humankind, I think, and for the planet. I think this is really very, very important.
And how do you see these partnerships with companies? Is there something you would like to strengthen, or how do you see the future?
Well, it's on the one hand, it's risky because everyone talks about climate today. So for us, the first thing is to ensure that it's not only about climate, but it's also about nature and biodiversity. So it's very important that we understand that nature is maybe less, I mean, it's less, not as well understood as climate, but it's very important that we really grasp the complexity of what fresh waters, oceans, forests, what it means for the human being. So it's very important that companies get that, because the idea is that insurers or investors like AXA understand that it's absolutely crucial to divest from harmful investments and activities, and to redirect those financial flows into virtuous and nature-positive investments. So this must gear every single decision, I hope, at AXA teams.
And we will tackle this topic exactly a bit later on in another webinar. So I really understand that companies have a crucial role to play in the transformation of our models towards a sustainable model economy. But do you think if the economic crisis worsens, with the COVID-19, seeing social revolts emerging, like we do this today, do you think that companies can disengage from their commitments, withdraw their green sustainable commitments?
That's indeed a risk. It's a risk that would be a shame, because it would be a really short-sighted approach. I mean, the real crisis we're sitting on, and that's really there, is the climate and the nature crisis. So this ecological crisis as a whole needs to be tackled in priority. So now COVID-19 represents an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really, it's a watershed moment, a turning point that we need to seize to transform profoundly the ways we produce, the consumption patterns, the ways we distribute things, transports, buildings, and move into a sustainable, resilient economy. And that means net zero greenhouse gas emissions. That means understanding the ecological ceilings, the planetary boundaries, and really working within those boundaries and this ecological ceiling. And that is really important, that there is across the board a comprehension and understanding of that this is the real crisis that we need to tackle. And the solutions are there. I mean, they create jobs. Renewable energies create more jobs than coal and fossil fuels. We need to seize this opportunity to really put the global economy on the right direction, because the trends today, as we saw, are not going in the right direction. So now there is massive recovery plans with large amounts of money. The idea is that the companies and the different economic actors that get those subsidies, that they really use them in a nature-positive way and in a way that is aligned with the Paris Accord. And so there is a risk, but I see it as an opportunity. I hope that CEOs see it as an opportunity, because it's an opportunity for innovation, an opportunity for developing a comparative advantage, an opportunity to create jobs, and an opportunity to create the next economy, an economy that is fit for the future.
Thank you. I've got a question. Transition also means efforts for population, companies, employees. How to find the right path between the Amish and business as usual?
Excuse me, how do you find the right?
How do you find the right path between the Amish and business as usual?
I mean, indeed, business as usual is we saw it. It's just no longer an option. It's just a fake question to pose the problem as if we could still choose to keep on doing what we have been doing for the past 50 years. It just no longer works. Science is unanimous, both on climate and on biodiversity. We need to find alternatives. So the alternative solutions exist, and it doesn't mean to just, stop the economy. What we saw during this crisis is that the economy stopped, but not because there was a good, let's say, a planned intervention, a planned multi-year approach. It was just, let's say, something that was imposed on us and that caused a lot of human suffering. So this is not how we want to see things evolving. We need a robust trajectory to cut down greenhouse gas emissions and a complete transformation of the core businesses and the economic models.
Okay, so just in a few words, I'll let you conclude. So the question we asked at the beginning, why business is no longer an option anymore. So can you answer in a short?
For me, it would be an invitation to AXA and to its teams to really embrace this goal and this ambition, and to really walk the talk and translate those commitments into practice. So it's going to be a very important year until the end of 2021. So let's make sure that we have an ambitious framework in terms of the objectives for nature and climate, and also that AXA's investments and that its portfolio is really aligned with what science tells us. So that would be my conclusion message.
Thank you very much, Véronique, for coming and sharing your analysis of the situation and I would say your motivating and positive message. Thank you very much. And it's really great to see that you work hand in hand with AXA to act on the transformation of the sector, insurance asset management sector. It's really great. So this brings us to the end of our session about global warming. Business as usual is no longer an option. Thank you very much for listening, and I invite you to log in 10 minutes, because after this very expert look at the responsibility of companies in the fight against global warming, we'll discover in the next sequence how AXA is adapting to these issues with Antoine Denoy, CEO of AXA Climate. See you. Bye-bye.